Hello, I'm Tasha Black, Captain Tasha Black. I am the captain of the most tactical FIB team in Los Santos. Governor Walsh thinks that my team and I need to find a healthy way to dissolve from the cases we take. It all can seem to get to us at the end of the day, so I agree. I've made my team and myself start discussing things by either writing them down or talking them out on video, which of course is signed off by Governor Walsh. So I guess I will start by talking about myself and how and why I got where I am today. I've talked about it before, but my parents were killed in a car crash. They were hit by a drunk driver and they died at the scene of the accident. I was only 18 when it happened, so I didn't get to enjoy the normal life of an 18-year-old, especially since my parents left me to take care of my little sister, Taylor. Taylor was 13 at the time, so there was no way she could help support us, so I took care of the both of us. I went to school during the day and worked at night just to be able to take care of us. I had always planned on going to college right after high school, but with the big responsibility thrown into my lap, I couldn't because I couldn't leave Taylor behind. Once I graduated, I took on 2 jobs to save up some money so that Taylor could afford to do what I couldn't and continue getting an advanced education. I worked at the Maze Bank during the day and as a bartender at night. Being a bartender is what allowed me to meet him. And meeting him led me to be the very captain I am today. You see, most people don't know this, but I actually am married and we have 2 children. My husband's name is Marcus Black. There's a reason I don't mention my personal family life. Marcus is actually a military general. I met him one night at my bartending job as he and his unit were staying in town before their deployment. I remember it like it was yesterday. Marcus and his unit walked in and you could immediately tell they were in the service. Single file line, neatly dressed, walked straight, no slouching at all. You know exactly what kind of guys they were. They all came to the bar and ordered their drinks. Marcus stood out because, unlike his unit, he didn't order a drink with alcohol. He ordered a glass of lemonade. As his unit laughed it up all night, very loudly might I add, while they were drinking, there was Marcus, smiling at them, but quiet, and drinking his lemonade. As a bartender, you learn quickly that everyone has a story to tell. Most of the time, you involuntarily hear them. However, I wanted to know his. He seemed different. So I went right up to him to strike up a conversation. He seemed interesting as he told me about himself. He wasn't a general just yet, just a soldier. He had 1 deployment before and he was nervous about this one. He said he nearly died on his last tour. His unit got caught off guard by an ambush during their drinking games at his base. He was 4 tequila shots in when he heard the guns go off and watched 2 of his buddies die in 10 seconds. Most of his unit died, being too drunk to hold up against the enemy. He said he hasn't drunk anything with alcohol since. So his choice of drink at the bar now made sense. After that, we struck up more conversation while I worked. His unit was leaving for the night, so he had to go too. But every night until they deployed, he came back to the bar to talk to me. After 3 weeks, he asked me out. We went out quite a few times before 3 months later, he deployed. He stayed in touch with phone calls and letters. He returned in 6 months. 4 months after his return, he asked me to marry him. I told him I thought he was crazy. We've known each other for less than 2 years. Plus, I still had to think about Taylor. I couldn't just be a military wife and leave her behind. He told me he knew what he wanted since we met, and he'd wait until it felt right for me. 3 years later, we got married. I thought my story began when I was 18, dealing with my parents' death and raising my younger sister. I didn't know that this is where my story was just beginning. The year we got married is when Taylor turned 18. She was able to officially start taking care of herself. She did, in fact, get into a college outside of Los Santos, and I gave her all the money I had saved up for her to be able to support herself. I quit bartending and decided to take college night courses. Marcus was due back for a 3rd deployment, so I figured I needed to start fulfilling some areas in my life outside of us. On the way to one of my courses one night, I heard an argument between a man and a woman and heard a gun being cocked, so I ran to where I heard the noise. Before I could round the corner, the gun went off, and then when I turned the corner, I saw the gun pointed at a little boy. Before the trigger was pulled on him, I used a tactic that Marcus taught me to defend myself with and kicked the gun out of the man's hand. I punched him 3 times before he went out cold. I hugged on to the little boy as we waited for the police to come. The man was arrested, but it was his mom who had been shot and killed. The man was his dad, so basically the little boy had no parents now. Marcus was called to the scene, being my emergency contact, and I told him what happened. I told him how I knew this would traumatize this kid and how I felt obligated to take care of him. Marcus understood immediately what I was feeling, and I knew he was in agreement with me. We fought for months getting the boy adopted to us, but we finally did it. That's how we got our first kid, our son, Derek Black. After that night of what happened with Derek, I knew what I really wanted to do with my life. What I knew I had to do to make this crazy world a safer place for my son. I knew I wanted to go into law enforcement. Marcus and I raised Derek together until Marcus got deployed for his 3rd tour. Derek was 8 years old when we took him in, so we did need a little help in raising him because I was now going to the police academy and we both knew Marcus would get deployed soon. So we hired a babysitter. I was in the academy for 6 months and Marcus got deployed right after I went into the field. His deployment, however, this time was longer and much different. Within 1.5 years, I became a detective. 2 years later, I went into homicide. 2 more years later, I was made captain over the FIB agency, and Marcus was around for none of it, as he was still deployed. He was made general during this time. One time after I solved a case, it was the first case where I came across Agent Christie. I got a phone call. It was from the U.S. military telling me my husband was dead, but they couldn't find his body because his unit got lost. I was shaken to my core. I felt like all the breath in my body was suddenly gone, and it was just my lifeless body still existing. We had Marcus's funeral a week after that call, and I stood there crying over a casket without my husband's body in it. I was still thinking about caring for my now 13-year-old son. So imagine my surprise when we came home after the funeral. There Marcus was sitting on our couch, all battered and bruised up and not dead. Marcus explained to me that he and his unit did not get lost. They found out some information they shouldn't have about the military, dealing in illegal arms and drug shipments. Apparently, Marcus was flying across seas and going to report this information to the justice courts when he and his unit were hit with a missile. Their plane did go down, but they survived, barely. He figured it was his own military that had done it, so when he heard about his so-called funeral, he knew it. He didn't want them knowing he and his unit were alive. I agreed, thinking it wouldn't be safe because they'd try to kill him again. So we sold the house we bought when we got married. Bought this boat here, and we've been here, out on the sea since. Our boat is heavily guarded by a private mercenary company. I kept my job because I did love it, but also to keep up the appearance. No one knew Marcus was alive but our family and Taylor. During the first year in our new life, I got pregnant. We ended up having a little girl, Tracy. Marcus loved everything about fatherhood. He loved our kids. But I could see he was struggling to keep life like a regular person. So needless to say, I wasn't shocked when he told me that he was taking himself and his unit back into the country, where they found out the U.S. military were in dirty dealings. He wanted to collect hardcore proof so he can take it to the courts. I told him it was dangerous, but Marcus was headstrong about it, so he went ahead and did it. It's been 3 years, and he still hasn't collected enough evidence. He needs to prove it all. We keep in contact, and he even gets to talk to the kids. As much as I want him back home, I understand why he's doing what he's doing. Taylor ended up staying with me for some time to help out with the kids, whom are 16 and 4. I continue to work these cases like I do because it makes me feel safer for my family, knowing I'm doing what needs to be done to rid the world of some of its evil, while my husband does the same. Everything I do is for them, for my family, and that's why I'm always so strong about us doing our jobs on my FIB team. We make the difference. So, anyways, I hope getting all of this off of my chest helps me in the long run. Glad I was able to finally say half of that out loud because I never have before. Well, that's all for now, but I will give you a look around at the boat here. This is Captain Tasha Black, signing off.